Any reproduction or retransmission of this broadcast is strictly prohibited without written consent of WSTU. It's time to call in with your questions and comments at 220-9788, 220-WSTU. And now, here's Casey Ingram.
Good morning, and we're back with the second half of the show, and I have my wonderful repeat guest. I have Mayor Troy McDonald from the city of Stuart. How are you doing today, Troy?
I'm doing great. How are you doing? Glad to be here.
Always wonderful, and it's always such a pleasure to have you here in the studio because you are a wealth of information about what is happening with the city. And Troy, I am remiss, and I should have looked this up before, but how long have you been a city commissioner?
So I was from 2011 to 2018, I was a city commissioner, and then I guess the voters decided I needed a little vacation. And so I came back, and then 2 years later, I got elected again in 2020. So I guess a total of 11 years, I guess.
But I think that kind of gave you some great insight stepping out for a couple of years. I know you've said that. You said actually, as it turned out, it was a good thing.
It gives you a fresh perspective. One of the things that when you live inside the whether it's at a small government the size of Stuart, and I would imagine what it's like when you're at the national level, when you live inside that bubble and you're working hard trying to do good things, you're only seeing it from the inside. And then when you get back outside, then you start seeing other aspects of things. Some of them are subtle, some are more dramatic, but this is kind of funny. Some people are going to laugh when I say this, but everybody who's been in office should lose at least one election.
There you go.
I mean, because it is a learning experience as to, especially when you look at why you lost and then if you come back, why you won when you came back. So.
And I'm sure your perspective changes so much when you're out of office and then you're sitting back as one of the members of the public watching, all the commissioners that are working, and you would understand better than anybody both sides of that coin. So
I know your phone rings a lot less when you're not in office.
I bet Portia doesn't mind that one bit. Portia's his beautiful wife. So, Troy, there's been so much that's been going on. You were in here last time. We talked about some different bills that were going through Tallahassee at the time, but now session is over. Can you share with us some of the bills that really impacted home rule in particular?
Well, of course, I think the one that we've been talking the most about is the Live Local Act. And that is the affordable housing bill. It was the Senate President's priority legislation. It passed 40-0 in the Senate and only 6 no's in the House. So it definitely was a bipartisan bill. There are probably some good aspects of it. There's $700 million to different housing programs. But on the home rule side at the local level, the legislature has said pretty bluntly, we don't think local government is approving enough projects, enough multifamily, affordable housing, and they've taken that basically out of the local government, the local elected officials' hands, and they put in language must approve.
For example, like a commercial, something that's zoned commercial is something you no longer have to vote on to say if a multifamily can go in there.
Right. So the current status, if someone wants to come in and do a multifamily project from now to July 1st, and then after July 1st, if they want to do something that's not a multifamily affordable housing project, if they want to do some for sale townhomes, for example, they would have to come in and get a land use change, get a zoning change, get probably a PUD approved. Now they come in, they file an application. It's approved by the and let me go back for a second. When I say it gets all those have to be approved, first they have to be approved by the different boards. First, the local planning agency, the LPA, would approve it, or the community redevelopment board would look at it. And then it would go to the city commission, and the city commission would have generally at least two readings on it.
Okay.
But now, if someone wants to take a commercial parcel or a mixed-use parcel or a multifamily parcel, it's already multifamily, they can just come in, file an application, and without any approval from the commission, administratively, it must be approved. Now, it does have to meet the local development rules as far as setbacks and parking spaces and so forth. But
Well, I think even density requirements are.
well, that's what I was going to
Okay.
get at. The density is the maximum density allowable in our comp plan. And so the way the city has handled density is by right in our multifamily, you can, for example, you can get 15 units an acre, and then by right you can get up to through the PUD process. And the reason we always did the PUD process for anything over 15 units an acre is, for one, we have it's a different set of zoning rules. For example, we have a 25% upland preservation. We would also ask for roads. If you're going to ask for that higher density, you're going to need to provide a public benefit other than just providing housing. And the city of Stuart has done a very good job. We actually have one land use neighborhood special district that requires a PUD, and it only allows 15 units an acre. It's a mixed use type of land use, and the zoning only allows 15 units an acre, but they have to do a PUD because in that way we have the ability to ask for roads, advanced drainage, upland preservation, wetland mitigation that normally would not need to be done under straight zoning with up to 15 units an acre.
So does this legislation change any of that, or is that still applicable?
It still is in play, except if they come in on using the Senate Bill 102, the Live Local Act, then everything is done administratively, and they get up to 30 units an acre. No, and they don't need. And all of those things that are part of the PUD, like the upland preservation, goes away.
The public benefits, because they're not written in the comp plan. That was something you could negotiate for.
Right.
It might be a sidewalk. It might be
Right. We
something else.
can't negotiate. We can't negotiate with the developers on these. It does not come to the city commission. The city commission or the county commission will not get a vote on these.
So, folks, I think that's really going to be the biggest change. We're all already seeing a lot of development that's went on in the county, and people are, out there talking about it. But these are issues that are not going to have anything to do with what the city or the county commission now. It's
Right.
these developments.
And here, when I went to Tallahassee, and I talked to members of the legislature from all across the state, I got the same answer as to why they were promoting this type of legislation. And it's, quite frankly, they feel local government is turning down too many developments or making it too difficult to develop. And that is creating a housing crisis with as many as 1,500 people a day moving to the state. I understand in 2022, 370,000 people moved to the state of Florida.
Incredible.
And so just keeping up with that growth, if that's the case, if that keeps up at that pace, we'll be close to 30 million people in the state in 2030. I serve as chairman of the Martin County MPO, and as that position, I also serve on the statewide MPO, the MPOAC. And at our last quarterly meeting, the Secretary Jared Perdue, the Florida Department of Transportation Secretary, came and spoke to us. And this gentleman was a real pro. He started out, he's in a political appointed position, but he started out from day one working for FDOT and just worked his way up to the top.
Okay.
So he is a genuine transportation expert and official, and he was, for a young guy, really amazing. But what he said was the Florida Department of Transportation is expecting exponential growth in the state over the next several years. And so the good news on that, on the side of where we're having issues with the local home rule issues, the state this year actually upped their transportation funding by $2 billion for new roads. Wow. And transportation projects. In addition to that, the legislature put $7 billion aside on top of the normal transportation budget for 20 major projects in the state. So
wow, that's fantastic.
So $21 billion this year for transportation projects, and by transportation, it's street, bridges, roads, harbors, public transportation as well.
Again, we're speaking with Mayor Troy McDonald from the city of Stuart. Troy, you guys also had discussed there was a half unit or 3/4 unit with the city if it counted and what the square footage would be, because does this play into this Live Local Act now? When you say 15 units, does that mean if it's only 500, that's really automatically 30 units?
No. So one thing is we believe that, and of course the law hasn't gone into effect yet.
Right.
But
July 1st, is
July
it?
1st is
Okay.
when it goes into effect. But one of the things is we do have a process where you can do what they call fractional units, and the idea was to create smaller units to that would be more affordable, and they're only allowed in the urbanized area of downtown, which should be the more density. It's already developed.
Okay.
And so generally, so what we've done is. This was initially passed when I was out of office, and quite honestly, I didn't like the ordinance the way it was written. And the reason why I didn't like it was they had a half unit was 900 square feet, and a 3/4 unit was 1,100 up to 1,100 square feet.
Okay.
The problem is that 900 square feet is really what a lot of full-size apartments are, for example.
Right.
So, and there was no cap on how much you could take advantage of this. So you could theoretically come in with at 30 units an acre and through the urbanized UPUD get go up to 60 units an acre if they were 900 square feet. What we've done is we've dialed that back. I finally got it done, dialed it back. We made the sizes smaller, so a half unit is 500 or less,
Okay.
and 3/4 unit is 700 or less. We adjusted the parking for different size units. We added additional parking for the 3/4 units and for the full size units. We kept the parking we felt was okay for the half unit that we had. Then what we did was capped it so they can only take 50% advantage of the density. So if they were just going to go all half units, the most they could get would be 45 units instead of 60.
Okay.
So,
Okay. That's a really good clarification. Thank
Yeah.
you. That was something everybody was following along. You
right,
know.
and now we believe that within the Live Local Act, to take advantage of that, they would need a hearing. So,
Okay, okay.
So we do believe that that would require a hearing from the city commission. So I'm not too worried about that, and I'm not as in the city limits of Stuart. There's very few parcels that will probably be practical for the Live Local Act, which is good.
There's not a lot left to develop within
No.
the city already. And also, I wanted to point out with the Live Local Act, there was a caveat that I think it was 40% had to be affordable, but affordable is a
Affordable is a
misnomer for the term, I
right.
think.
It's the affordable. If I understand it correctly, the affordable is 120% of the annual median income of the county or the state, whatever is higher, for a family of four, which is $84,000 in Martin County. Multiply that by 120%, you come up to like 102. Effectively, it's like $2,500 a month for rent and utilities. Now, what is a utility is a question. Water and sewer in most of your apartment complexes, water and sewer is included, and in the and then when you get into electric, is electric considered one of the utilities they consider? And if it is, how do you determine that? Is there just a formula used for a certain size? Because in my house, we keep the air conditioning pretty cold at night, but some people keep it at 75.
Right.
So what is that? So we're also, just because of that, we're putting in some protections. We're back at a workshop we decided, and it was land use something agreement, Lura agreement or something. Basically, what we're going to put restrictive covenants, land use restrictive agreement, I think is what it stood for. And we're going to put some restricted covenants. When they come in, they're going to need to sign an affidavit that the units will be affordable for 30 years. And we're looking at putting a restrictive covenant on the property so that for the 30 years it maintains its it maintains that affordability.
Who checks that they maintain that for 30 years?
There's nothing I know of in the statute that does. And
This is what's interesting with these bills. You just said, what are our utilities? There's things that, if it's not spelled out very clearly, this leaves,
And
leaves it up for
DEO may make
interpretation.
and DEO Department of Economic Opportunity may make some rules on this. But there's other bills out there and things out there. So City of Stuart.
Yeah, let's talk about this. There's other home rule bills that were passed through legislature this year. So I'd love to hear about these and how they impact the city. This is super important.
Yeah. So one of the things I found really interesting, and I haven't read it myself. It's apparently but I've seen some stuff coming through from, I think, Vote Water on it. There's buried in the budget is a provision to take away local control of fertilizer ordinances. As Casey, as you probably know, City of
Wow.
Stuart was one of the first municipalities in the state to do a fertilizer ordinance, and later on we put a blackout period for a certain part of the year. And I believe that this may take, if one understand this provision in the budget, not even a standalone bill, just buried in the budget, would take that our ability away to do that. There's a bill out there that it's an attorney's fees bill for challenging a land use. So effectively, if a resident wants to challenge land use and they lose, they will have to pay attorney's fees and that can be into hundreds of thousands.
Super
of dollars.
expensive. Yes.
And people might be surprised that I don't support that legislation. I don't. I think the residents have the right to challenge and appeal. Admittedly, it's frustrating from our end when we make a decision, it gets challenged, but that's what keeps us honest. And I think that. And I think it's okay.
I think it's a shame because it takes away a voice of the common everyday people. Folks don't have a lot of money to litigate as it is, and if they tag on the developer's fees or what have you, they're effectively shutting down the process. And I'm one that I want to hear everybody's voice, whether I agree with it or not. And
I'm fine, and and I'll defend the city's actions.
Right.
But
it's fair to hear everybody's voice.
It's fair. And so it is these are some of the challenges that are out there. There's bills out there that we talked about, a sanitation bill, and to be honest, I don't even know the outcome of it. That one got to the point where it was down on my radar because it wasn't as important because there was so many other big things. There's one that I understand that passed and sitting on the governor's desk that would require counties and municipalities to do an economic study of every ordinance they pass to see if it would negatively affect any businesses.
Folks, can you imagine how much money that's going to cost? An economic study of every ordinance you pass.
And then if it does affect a business, then the business has the right to sue us. They were looking at raising we have sovereign immunity limits, so how much liability a city or a county would have, and they were looking at raising it to a couple $1 million. If they do that, a slip and fall could bankrupt a small city. A city like Sewell's Point, which is
right.
Which has just a couple thousand residents. Someone trips over a sidewalk, gets $1 million judgment. I mean, how do you pay for it?
That's right. That's right. This is they have a limited amount of taxes they're bringing in from their residents. So all of a sudden,
exactly. And even when they do things like, for example, I think the legislature is working on putting on the limiting the amount on homestead property from 3% to 2% a year, and people don't realize the negative effect that has to local government. When things are hot and fast like they are now, they're very good. The problem is, if we have an event like 2008, the city lost 70% of its ad valorem in 2008.
Right.
And it just took from 2008 to 2000, I think 21 or 22 budget, they get the ad valorem back to where it was in 2008. And so it can go down very fast and then come back up very slowly, and that's a challenge. And quite honestly, the only reason I think we got there when we did was because people started selling their homes and they were being reassessed. And police and fire equate to more than what we take in an ad valorem. So we have other revenues, shared revenues from sales tax and communication service tax, utility taxes. But police and fire alone equate more take more revenue than just what our ad valorem does.
That's what's so tough with, Tallahassee, that they take over legislation and they take over home rule. I know with a lot of these exemptions, some of these smaller communities, and I was able to visit Palatka, and I think of them in particular, but there's a lot of communities through Florida that can say this, even homestead exemptions. And when you add an extra one on for, let's say, a widower or a veteran, or if you're a first responder, you keep adding these exemptions on. These communities are so poor to begin with that all of a sudden they don't have a tax base. And,
Right.
It's great for somebody like, Jupiter Island or West Palm Beach, Martin County, where you have more affluent residents. They can handle it, buffer it a little bit better, but this sweeping legislation for the entire state doesn't take into all those individual circumstances. And with the Live Local Act, I want to go back to that. I think that it was you, and I may be wrong, that said, this really impacts these smaller communities more than it does the ones that are already higher density.
Oh yeah, the higher it's not going to affect Orlando at all,
Or Miami,
or Miami, or Fort Lauderdale, or even Palm Beach County. But how about Indiantown?
Right.
It could because Indiantown is a 15-minute drive from Palm Beach County, and so right down 710. It is. We were talking about going back to the assessed values. Jupiter Island,
Right.
I believe, has a higher assessed value for property tax than all of Okeechobee, including the new power plant.
I believe that.
And in fact, the new power plant doubled the assessed value.
Wow.
And so think about how tough it is for them when it comes to schools, just running a building department, running a fire department. When you start running out in these rural areas.
That's right.
It's really tough. Try to get an ambulance out to some of the rural areas of Okeechobee in 8 minutes to save someone from a heart attack.
That's right.
You can't.
You can't, just like the fire department as well. You
Right.
don't have them just right down the street. Here's another issue that you were talking about locally. Here was the Haney Creek parcel. Is a 2-acre parcel on US 1, whether or not that little parcel was cut out for commercial use.
Yeah. So going back to 2011, the property known as Heart of Haney Creek, 53 acres, had been before 2008 had been set for development. It was going to be a mixed-use development, shops, retail, resident, and the market crashed. It went into I believe it went into foreclosure. Bank may have gotten it back. And that happened before I came on the city commission. But the year I came on the city commission, an effort led by Commissioner Kruskoff to buy the property and turn it into conservation land. But, Commissioner Kruskoff, being the wise fiscal conservative that he is, wanted a way to fund that property. So we had a 2-acre lot that was not part of it that we worked with the county to roll in, because it was a joint purchase. The county rolled that property into Haney Creek. Then we carved out a 2-acre parcel up on US 1 that would be one of the best parcels for development from the perspective of no wetlands, dry, no endangered trees, stuff like that. So it's right on US 1 as well.
Right.
Then we went to because that parcel was connected, so we closed on that property, had that carve out. Because that property is connected to the Haney Creek, which is tidally influenced property, we made the determination that it fell into the requirement that we do a referendum. So we did a referendum asking for permission to lease this property, and saying that all of the proceeds would go to fund Haney Creek. And so in the meantime, the city's been maintaining Haney Creek and upgrading it. But the idea is that we didn't want to use tax dollars. And so what we did was that passed with 76% of the vote.
Well, let's say that was in 2011, right? When the
2011.
economic times were at the bottom.
Yep, and it
tanked. And
it tanked.
There wasn't
And-
a lot of money coming in.
And
So
there wasn't a lot of money coming in. And quite honestly, that's why it took so long to find a developer that wanted to build on the property. We've had 2 or 3 fall through. We had a hotel fall through. There was another thing. One of the other things we did in 2014, I believe it was, the city was worried that a gas station or something would come in, so we went and actually did a PUD on the property, limiting what uses it could be.
Okay.
So recently, we've had some inquiries, and we had a couple of letters of intent looking to lease the property. We had a discussion, and there was I'll say a spirited debate about whether we should lease it or should turn into conservation. First, the voters have spoken, in my opinion, and told us they want us to be fiscally responsible, and they want us to have a funding source for it. We made promises when we did
back in 2011.
Back in 2011, right. And by the way, we've reiterated those promises year after year after year.
Right. Okay.
And I think it's really important when it comes to, there's an effort to buy conservation land in Martin County right now, and it's very important that we keep our promises. These purchases aren't 5 and 10 year purchases. These are multi-generational purchases and programs, and we got to keep our word. If we go back on our word from 2011 and say, we just changed our mind, we're not going to fund that. Now we have to raise our taxes in order to fund this and continue to maintain this. And we're quite honestly, our budget is solid right now, but we all know Florida. How often have we seen real estate budgets come? Real estate markets crash.
Yep.
It's the state of Florida is up and down, and I'm doing this on the radio.
Yeah, we see it on Facebook Live. He's doing the graphic with his hand up and down.
At least I'm not holding up a sign.
Right.
There was a presidential candidate did that one time on a radio program. Held up a sign.
Doesn't help.
For the listeners. But that's one of the things that I think is important that we maintain. So we have voted to authorize staff to negotiate a lease. And they want to, we put a couple of parameters in there. For example, I put a parameter in that the tenant would have to pay for all the infrastructure. So if there is a decel lane or something that needs to be put in, they're paying for it. If there's a traffic signal that needs to be put in, they're paying for it, not the city.
Okay.
So sometimes when you do leases, land leases, sometimes the landholder does does infrastructure improvements. And so, but I don't want us to do that. I just want to get a check every month and be done.
And that takes care of Haney Creek.
Yeah.
So folks asked this, is there a place to park out there by Haney Creek? I know that was something people wanted.
Yeah, well, there is some parking that is right on Dixie Highway, and when we did the approval of TC3 Church, there's actually in that approval with authorization
20 seconds.
Authorization to use the TC3's parking.
Fantastic. We've been talking with Mayor Troy McDonald. I wish we had more time to keep going, but we have to drop the subject for today. Commissioner, thank you so much for coming in again, and thank you for your service to the City of Stuart, and as always, it's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. Glad to be here.